Welcome to the UN CEFACT Global Trust Registry project. We're recording this meeting. The recording will be made available shortly after the meeting, and there'll be a transcripts and minutes. If you have any concerns about that, please raise them. If you want to record your presence, then make a note in the chat message or something. If you're not actually active on the call, the recording won't necessarily capture it. Quick reminder about conduct and IPR. This is a project being run under the UN CEFACT open development process. There are intellectual property rules and codes of conduct that are expected of us all as participants, and I hope you're all familiar with it because I know all the faces I'm looking at. But if you need a reminder, click the links on the slide. The agenda today I'm proposing, but I'm very happy if people want to shout out and say, look, there's something else we really have to talk about, is a quick sort of recap on some things. I'll just show you where the minutes are put so that if you're ever in doubt about what was discussed last time, if you didn't attend the last meeting, you'll be able to see them. So we'll click on that link and I'll show you where they are. I want to talk about the schedule, and I'm glad Steve's on board because he's one of the UN CEFACT Bureau vice chairs. So it'll be good to get his feedback on what I think the schedule should be for us. And then I really want to focus on the proposed issues and discussions and merge requests and so on, and do the guts of the work of getting things done. So that's what my suggestion is. Is there anything else anybody wants to add to the agenda to that?
Just one little thing. I think we're not sharing the screen.
Say again, Sankashan.
The screen share is not on, I believe.
Perfect, thank you. I've done that again. Let me share my screen. It's funny how, oh, come on, share. It's like being a child again. You assume everybody can see what you're seeing. So if I cover my eyes, I'm obviously invisible. Okay, so this is the agenda that I was talking to, but now you can see. And what I will do just quickly is, if you ever want to know what the minutes were of the last meetings, if you weren't able to attend, then they're in the Git lab repository. They're under the sort of docs and meetings folder, and you can see these files here that talk about the specifics of the meetings. They're also presented on our website, the sort of rendered pages that show people kind of what the content is. So these are the meeting 2 weeks ago with myself, William, and Sankashan and Yash turned up from the I think from the Indian delegation, and the meeting that we had then, and the sort of PST Canadian time was with these attendees and this topic. So those are always available to everybody if you want to remind what's going on. The thing I want to spend a little bit more time on than the previous meetings is the schedule. So what we found out of about 2 weeks ago was that the forum is in May. So the forum for UN CEFACT is in May 20 to the 21st, 2 days in Geneva. What I'm proposing on this schedule is we use that as a target for our work. And if I've understood correctly, we are producing what is called a business requirement specification, is the type of document that this project is producing. So it's not a recommendation, which has a whole other set of obligations, but a BRS still requires time for review, public review. Now, we can reasonably argue that we're always in public review, witness this meeting, and the documents are on GitLab and issues and so on. But there's still a process that says you should finish effectively a draft final version of documents, leave them stable, and let them open for review. And then that's a 60-day period, if I've understood correctly. Is that right, Steve, so far?
Yeah, just a minor correction. I'm not aware of any forum in May. The budgetary, the budgetary constraints of UN have led to one meeting a year.
Okay, cool.
A combined forum and plenary, which is scheduled for November.
Okay.
On top of that, and just a reminder, the only things that need plenary approval in these annual meetings are policy recommendations, which this project may produce one, but it's a bit orthogonal to the rest of the stuff, right? And they don't need to be coupled. For the rest of your deliverables, a bureau approval to enter 60-day review, and then a bureau approval having completed 60-day review and resolved or not resolved, whatever the issues that come up, is enough to get the project finalized.
And those can be at any time, Steve?
Every month.
Every month.
Well, they may be less frequently, but but we can do out of session approvals, right? So we can say, hey, there's this thing ready for your approval, and I just harass other vice chairs and say, shake the tree and get them to respond, basically.
Excellent. Obviously, I'm sure you're right, but we'll recheck those forum dates, because I know that they were at one time they were published, but it would make sense to me given what I've seen the Secretary General of the UN has declared about the budget for the UN. It wouldn't surprise me if there were cuts being made to meetings and so on. So, but that also might mean we can relax the schedule you're seeing on your screens right now a little. So what this red line denotes is kind of where we are now with this meeting. And I'm saying that there are two main threads of activity we're working on. One is this ideas around the digital identity anchor specification and use pattern, which is one of the issues that we're discussing quite actively. You'll see in a moment. And the other is the body of work that describes the grid. So I'm calling it the BRS, the business requirement specification, because that's a sort of collective noun, if you like, for a type of document. It includes all the elements that we've been working on so far, in at least in my mind. That's what I'm considering bundled in BRS. What I was going to suggest is that we got a couple of, a week or so of work on a kind of like the live form of these documents until we get into a kind of more finalization process. So what I'm going to suggest from a GitLab point of view is we declare it to be a kind of released version at the end of say a week or so, and then we work on changes that have a traceable change pattern from that point until say 3 or so weeks after that date. And then we would, if we're ready, declare that we've released our documents, they're final, and here they are. We produce a kind of Word and PDF type versions of what we have. It sounds like
I would suggest that the authoritative specification is the GitLab site.
I'd like to. I would go 2 thumbs up, please, Steve. If we
yeah,
can,
I've had some battles about this, right? When it comes to something like a policy recommendation, that is a PDF document, sent to nations. But when it comes to a technical specification and a live thing like a grid register, if anything's in PDF, for my mind, it's more like guidance and how-tos and overviews and things like this. But the actual authoritative content, and I will go to bat for you on that, because I got the same challenge with UNTP, right? Am I going to take a huge website and make a PDF and say, please approve this? Or am I going to say, these are the normative pages on UNTP, and these are the informational pages. You're asked to review the normative pages and make comments. And that's it, right?
Well, I applaud your initiative, Steve. I sent an email earlier this morning to you, copied to Alina and Camilla, basically asking what the definition of done would be.
Yes.
This is very much to this discussion. So if you're able to help make a sensible decision be made, then I'll be very, very grateful for it, because I agree.
I think we can. Now, what you should do is a bit like on UNTP, where you're continuously doing updates and changes, and there's a kind of a bleeding edge latest version of the website. But there's also a point in time 0.6 version, right, which we're about to release a 0.7 version. So what you should do is say, all right, there's a point in time versioned release, call it 0. something, not 1.0, of the GTR on the website. This is the thing that is requested for feedback. And that means you can continue to maintain and update and apply learnings in the latest bleeding edge. You don't have to wait 60 days with your hands off the keyboard and do nothing. You just say the point, call it the 0.5 or whatever you want to call it. This is the thing going into public review, and it's frozen, but that doesn't preclude you closing out issues, looking at tickets, so that when you get to the end of the public review, there's not so much to do. Mm-hmm. So I can write you something about that, but we should be able to proceed that way. There's a bit of entrenched kind of, oh, this is the way we always used to do it, but there's also a willingness to say, oh yeah, let's get into the modern world. So
we were looking at that. I was looking at that earlier, and I felt like it was the 1990s. I was reminded of when I looked at the requirements of documentation. Harman, your hands up.
Yeah, just want to agree on this. I think it's also very much similar to, I think, a lot of the standards or spec discussions are going on now, right? So you have a version 1 of a particular specification, and then there's a draft 12, actually also already moving on, right? And you could even have a draft 14 and 15 already being discussed. But then there is like this one particular. So I think versioning is key, right? So if we can do versioning, yeah, and then if some people really would like an export of it in a PDF, that happens also quite often, right? So in theory, but I think that versioning is indeed crucial.
So if I summarize quickly, and I want to ask Alina what she thinks as well, what we need to do is to get our documents in a ready enough state, not calling them finished at the moment, but then sort of do a baseline or release number, and call that 0 point something. We may want to still work on that before we declare it to be ready for public review, but it's just establishing, okay, this is stable enough to call it something, and we're going to move on from here. Then we're going to declare ready for public review, and we're going to say that version 0.7 or whatever the number ends up being is the one that sort of is the one they look at whilst we still, as Steve said, carry on working in a session.
So I think your site's built on Docusaurus, isn't it? The same as,
yes, it is,
yeah, so it has that feature, right? Obviously, every time you make a commit to GitHub, that's like a version controlled repository update. But what Docusaurus lets you do is kind of declare after it can be 100 commits on GitLab to say, right, I'm declaring this version something, and it just gets frozen, right? And so that's the way to do it. Just whenever you're ready, say, this is the public review version, 0 point something, and I'll carry the flag for you with the bureau to make sure that that's what gets reviewed.
Thank you. Alina.
Yes, sorry, Steve. I just wanted to ask, what is the deadline for the public review? I saw that the forum was moved to November.
Yeah, so there isn't a meeting-related deadline, except for policy recommendations, right? Like recommendation 49. You may choose to write recommendation, I think it would be 52 if you write it, which would be a policy document targeted at member states to advise them about their role in identity verification, right? Sort of take everything you've done and say, how would you express this as guidance to a member state? There is an opportunity to write such a document, but that document would need plenary approval. And then you have to work back, right? November, a month to circulate a final version to member states, and then a few weeks for translation or a month, and then 2 months of public review. And you work your way back, and you'd have to have a draft version ready for public review of that policy guidance by something like probably June, July.
Does that make sense to you? Sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify. In this case, would we also need the approval of the member states, considering that, or I don't know if we agreed that it would be a recommendation or not? This to me is
two separate things, right? Your project, I think in the scope, did mention somewhere there's a line that's saying, maybe there's a policy recommendation coming out of it.
Okay.
I think it's quite an important kind of concept to get across, right, to member states, this one. So there is value in my mind in a policy document. But you've just got to work, that would be the only thing that needs plenary approval. The project, as in the website and all this deliberation, just needs bureau approval, which can happen anytime. So, deliver it when you're ready.
I've got a suggestion then, I think, which is that if this schedule you're seeing on your screen right now, it could be relaxed by a couple of weeks, say, and that might be very useful for us.
Absolutely.
What that would mean is that we're still aiming to publish the sort of project documents in this sort of time frame, which would give us the time, once the bureau's had a look at them, to agree there needs to be a recommendation written about this, and then to crystallize the recommendation before you were saying like June, July. Time frame, and that I think is still possible, because the recommendation won't be as voluminous, say, as the materials that we have for the rest of the
project. The shorter the better, right? A hard impacting, this is the problem, here's the solution, this is what you should do.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not mistaken, I think I understood that in the first place we were going to work on our recommendation, and then we said that maybe it would be better to approach it as a standard and then further on to create the recommendation. So I was a little bit confused on this point, because it's very important how we approach depending on this.
I think that's right, Alina, but I think that's what we are now sort of going back to that exact understanding. We're going to write a specification. That's what we're kind of working on right now, the rest of the document content. And at the point we finish that, we will be in a position to decide if we want to then write a recommendation with agreement from the Bureau.
I think there's a good practice kind of layering here, right? That hasn't necessarily been followed in the past. In fact, CEFACT has a habit of writing big documents that are untested and then publishing them as final truth, and everybody ignores them and they sit on the shelf. But if it was me, I would say what's important is writing a high quality technical specification, and the quality is the important thing, not the time frame. It takes what it takes to get to a certain quality. And the best way to have some confidence in the quality is pilot implementations, right? You actually try to use it, because until you try to use it, best will in the world, you don't find all the bugs in your technical specification, right? So I would say take the time you need to get as much sort of hands-on experience as you can through India and Spain and so on that are committed to try. Use that to inform the technical specification so that you have a high confidence, high quality. You can say, this is informed by these two pilots, and therefore we're confident it's right. And then that makes your policy recommendation even stronger, right? Because you're not just waving a kind of, oh, here's a good idea, why don't you do this? It's a good idea backed up by a successful pilot in 2 important member states and with a technical spec, right? So there is a logical sequence, which is do what you're doing, test it as best you can, finalize it, and then based on that, write a policy recommendation. I would do it in that order. And I think that the time frame is in your favor to do it in that order, right? Yep.
That's great. I'm encouraged. I'm always encouraged. I'm optimistic, but I do think that's a good reading of what's in front of us. Before I move on to the issues and merge stuff, is there anything else anyone wants to say about the schedule?
Steve, just one small question. How about the extension of the document? I understand that this is maybe not so important, as you were talking about the quality of the document rather than the number of pages, or...
Yeah, the only thing that has a page limit is policy recommendations. And they can have a huge appendix if you want, but I think you've got to think about, sort of senior ministers and people like that reading these things. The shorter the better, really. It's hard work to tell a good story in a few words, right? Some author, I forget who it was, said, I'm sorry I wrote such a long letter. I didn't have time for a short one. This is true, right? For policy recommendations. When they're long and waffly, they sit on the shelf. When they're short and hard hitting, they attract attention. It takes work to do that, right? But
okay.
Just one question on the planning, guys. How do the pilots fit into this kind of upcoming months? Is this because I think we all agree it is a really nice combination, right? By trying some of the concepts, becoming confident what direction is best, and also kind of coming up with proof. So is that also, so for instance, India and Spain happening already on short term, or do we expect it to come afterwards?
I could hand over to Alina. From my position, we want the pilots to start as soon as they're ready. We're kind of willing to collaborate, do whatever we can to help pilots. We're not saying you can't go yet at all. But I know Spain, you're active already, aren't you, Alina?
From our point of view, the only issue was, as I mentioned a few times, is that we're co-leading the We Build project from the European Commission, and we would like to harmonize or align both initiatives. This is the only topic we have to solve from our internal point of view.
And Alina, I think, if at a certain point of time we may need to talk about it maybe separately. We're in the middle of that as well, right? So we also work super closely with everybody, and we build, and we more with the Dutch Chamber of Commerce, where you, of course, are in Spain.
Yes.
It's the same topics. Everybody is asking, yeah, but what about the business?
Okay, so in your
what
case,
about the
it's the
EU
same
ID?
topic, right?
And I think we have a really good answer. But of
Okay.
course, it takes time, right? So.
Yeah, and that time, by the way, there's nothing to stop you running pilots whilst something is in the 60-day public review, right? I mean, the main point is try not to publish something 1.0 that you expect many nation states to build on without any evidence that it actually works, right?
But my main question is, would we have to wait for the recommendation or policy to be published in order to implement and develop
No.
the pilot project, or
No,
it's
absolutely not.
just two independent things?
Independent things, and in fact, better the opposite, right? A
Why?
policy recommendation will be more powerful if it has evidence of implementation behind it, right? So I would say test the thing you're specifying as soon as possible, and it doesn't matter if it runs in parallel to the public review. The main concern, forget about all the meetings and all the dependencies. Really, the concern is just to publish something of quality that we know works, right? And you do that by testing it, basically. And
Okay.
we've got Harman's work and your work.
Yeah, because I agree,
in
Steve. I
India.
think, yeah, that's exactly what we actually also have been doing for, I think, many others, right? So I think the whole point is, I think all of you, right? We've been working and thinking on this for many years already, I would say, right? So it's not suddenly started now, but I think what is happening now is we're kind of converging and kind of trying to standardize the thinking. And of course, there have to be some decisions being made which go into more detail, and that's why these pilots help. So I agree that, I mean, that's, I consider more or less, so it's maybe not formal, and maybe not all of you would look at it like it, but I think we are doing already a UN grid pilot. We have done it already, literally, and we're still working on some. So
then we should include that as part of the pilot scope, right? I mean, it's, you know, the formal nations are Spain and India, but there's nothing to stop you saying, oh, we're doing this thing with KVK, and it aligns with grid, and we've used it, and we're issuing, and it works. You know, any sort of, I think, on the wire evidence that the thing is tested and works is valuable, right? And makes the specification stronger, and then makes also the policy recommendation even stronger because it's based on evidence, not just an idea. Yeah.
And Harman, you were, in fact, you brought them into the meeting when you presented the Fidesz work, that your client, the KVK individual, they could be part of it too, right? I mean, they should be, and they're obviously the authoritative registrar for the Netherlands.
Yeah, and they are, right. So they literally paid what we were doing, right? And we are. I mean, today I have other meetings with the Dutch tax office there. I mean, we talk to them almost on a daily basis. But I think what is also important, I think you also have the exact same things. It's like, so we do that project already with them. And then of course the question is, do they also formally now become a UN grid project or not? So they may want to do it, right? So it's, I think, but they're super busy, right? Like Alina says, they're also super busy on WeBuild, right? So that's their top priority. And then, for instance, Said, that was in our call a couple of weeks ago, he's from the innovation department, right? So he's literally paid to look ahead of, for instance, WeBuild. So, and that's why he's also interested on this. So, yeah, I think in general, really, yes, right? So I think the only thing we have to also consider maybe is that there's different type of pilots. So for instance, what we did is, for a big part, we already did it, but I think it's really worth looking with certain people of this project at some of the details, because we can learn of, right? So it's absolutely not perfect or finished, but that's why I started kind of collaborating with you guys on this, because when we started, we used a lot of the thoughts you already had. We saw what UNTP did with DIA. We thought that fits exactly what we're doing already, but now it's called the DIA, and it starts to become more international and global. So we seem to agree on that. So we just participated on it, but I didn't even, I think, mention it to you guys. And now we talk more often, but
so So
Yeah.
it's encouraging, right? More pilots is good. If you can bring in KVK or others, then that's fabulous. But even just your experiences are good too, of course, Harman. I want to quickly close on the schedule. I think I'm going to propose 2 actions that I'll take. One is to change the way this particular representation looks right now to reflect the conversation we've just had about the first draft of the project specification documents. And then want to have a separate chart that talks about the possible recommendation process for the November plenary. I want to separate the two for logical reasons, because I think we can do one and the second part is a sort of decision. Do we write a recommendation for policy and so on? But also for graphical reasons, because the way these things are rendered doesn't work very well if you have too many months. So I'm going to make it split into sort of 2 sort of 6-month chunks, so that it's easier to see on the screen. But also that's a decision point, I think.
Harman, I would have a question for you.
Sure.
Who exactly or what institution is going to develop or implement the pilot project in Holland?
The one we are working on, you mean, or?
Yes.
Yeah, so actually we have been facilitating and we are facilitating a number of projects. So Fides Labs, that's kind of our company, is kind of hired to initiate and facilitate such projects. We've been doing that for the last couple of years. And we always say, but we don't provide, for instance, software solutions, or we're the neutral kind of orchestrator. So we are kind of hired to run that by the Dutch Tax Office and the Dutch Chamber of Commerce in this example.
Okay.
And then we invite and select tech providers to implement it, but always based on a clear interop profile and specifications.
No, but I was referring to the public institution. That would be then the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, and the Dutch Tax Office is the most involved at the moment. So yes, the Chamber of Commerce as well. So we also speak to them almost every week.
But what about the authoritative public registries in?
But they are. So
okay.
in Holland, the KVK, which I mentioned, they are the official formal registry of businesses. So literally exactly, I think, what we're talking about.
Yes.
And then the Dutch Tax Office, they're also kind of handing out different identifiers that are formal identifiers. So I think in our scope here, those 2 organizations in Holland are the main 2 formal business registries that issue business identities.
I might also point out that GRID has a formal kind of governance scope, right? It's for authoritative national registers. But DIA is used by GRID, but also used by UNTP for a much broader scope of identity linking, right? So, for example, the Manuka Beekeepers Association in New Zealand wants to issue a DIA to a farm, a beekeeper, that says, you are a genuine Manuka beekeeper. You could use a DIA for that. Obviously, the Manuka Beekeeper Association is not going to get listed in the GRID, but it could get listed in the UNTP site as a member association that has implemented UNTP, and will use much the same GRID structure, but it doesn't have the same GRID governance. The whole point of saying that is that there are many opportunities to test this architecture, not just in the formal GRID authoritative register context, and all the tests are valuable, right?
And we're doing it exactly as well, Steve. So we are doing also project what you are doing similar. Like we do stuff with trade documents as well, right? Just like Hans and others are doing. But so we are implementing this DIA concept in use cases around digital product passports, in use cases around trade documents, e-invoicing. So yeah, we try to implement kind of what you guys are describing.
So I'm going to suggest we move on to some of the issues, because there's some chunky things to talk about in the issues. And I think they're also lively conversations. So I'll just click on the same page to the issue. So this is, again, everybody has access to these issues, even if you don't log in. But if you log in, obviously you can put comments in, and you can, if you're so empowered, you can review and approve and do other things. There's a number of actions that are still open right now. A couple of the ones already got a merge request, as it's called. So there's some work done that sort of proposes to fix the issue. And the one I want to share, which is, and I want to apologize straight away to Alina, because we were talking about this and I've done some work, but you've not had the chance to look at it yet, I'm sure. So this is an issue both of us felt is in the current set of documentation, the ones that are rendered on the website. And what I'm suggesting in fixing this issue is that I fixed this issue, but there will probably be other work still to do. Much like Steve was saying, we're going to carry on working on the document. So whatever this issue makes things better, I'm not saying it makes them perfect in terms of the fix. So for all these issues, there's a sort of this preamble description of it. There are two main parts to this. One is there's a document I'm calling the target operating model, or TOM. That's the thing that talks about the legal governance and other sort of elements of the grid operation. And separately, there was a feeling about the glossary. So if I show you what the current version looks like, documents here. This is the website version you'll see if you go to un.opensource.unicc.org. You'll see, for example, the glossary is in Annex D on this thing. And what we felt was that given that we're leaning on the glossary, the terms like authoritative registrar, quite heavily in the things like the operating model, the legal governance and target operating model document, we should elevate the glossary to the earlier in the document set and not have it at the back end as a glossary, because people may not actually see it in Annex D. So if you look at the way I'm rendering this for my local build of the thing, if I flip between these two, you'll see that the document list changes on the left-hand side. And the glossary in the new version I'm proposing is up here. Straight after the economic argument goes straight to glossary. And that's just one of the changes. The other changes are inside this document, inside the legal governance and operating model. So Alina pointed out quite rightly that the eligibility requirements had been somewhat bent in the process of sort of simplifying working on the document. So if I show you the current version you would see if you went online and saw the website, you'd see these words would be the ones you would see. So we've got sort of very simplified representations of things like group membership is restricted to UN member states. But it's a little bit more precise than that. It's actually UN member states who choose to participate and who have an authoritative registrar. And then there's a few other sort of elements to that qualification process. And the layout wasn't particularly useful. So I've made it a bit better in this version that I'm proposing in the merge request. So this is a sort of a reshaping of the text, and it's a little bit stronger, and so on. So that's what is in. If I go back to the
as I suggested to specify better to what exactly do we refer.
Yes. So I think I've made it better, Alina, but I think it does need your review. But I know you're on holiday with everything else. So what I'm proposing to do is to take this this merge request and execute it. So that will actually pull the document content into the live page. But also then we can still then comment on the changes that have been made, because there's a few. You can see all the changes if you want to in sort of minutiae. By sort of looking at this version of the change log, it sort of shows you.
Yes, I was looking at the changes, and as well I have seen the item number 39, definition of authoritative register. That wait a second, because I don't see it what I was looking at.
I did
You added something, yes.
Yes, I did. Yeah, and you spotted that I missed it as well. So I missed the authoritative registrar definition, and I put it back in because it was an error in the merge request. So so both of those are in, but
now I see it. You have added, instead of official identifiers within a jurisdiction, you said official trade relevant identifiers.
Yes, and that goes to a point that's made in the operating manual, that the grid will need to decide. In a sense, there's a definition from CEFACT that we're interested in trade and commerce, and I'm
wondering what is the purpose of this trade identifiers instead of official identifiers. I mean, regarding the wording.
Because official
Because-
identifiers could be everything and anything.
Exactly, it reflects a structurally broader and
Yes, it does.
institutionally neutral concept. By
But
contrast, yes.
it does, but people then might bring in somewhat complicated concepts like, what about digital identity for people?
Yes,
And then we're into a
because
world of-
like,
Yeah.
for example, what about land then? It would be out because land is not trade.
But
Then it introduces
land
a
is trade relevant.
limitation somehow that might not be
land
necessary.
is trade relevant, because if you declare that your beef has been reared on a paddock that is not been deforested, you have to declare the land upon which that beef was reared. So land is quintessentially a trade relevant asset or value. Oh, Alina's gone. That's a shame. I think we kind of have to pause now.
In the middle of the discussion.
I know. I don't think it was anything I said. Let's see if she's trying to come back in again. Maybe the object was thrown over her shoulder by her daughter and it hit the keyboard or something. Who knows? Not coming back in yet. But just wait a second. What I'm going to propose when Alina comes back on is, if you look at this change request as it refreshes on my screen, I proposed Alina as the reviewer. Now I know that she's got an issue with the Authenticator app that she needs to use to log in to UNICC. Hi, Alina. So what I was just going to, oh, I can't hear you, you're mute.
Okay, my connection is kind of bad. Okay, we were talking about land. You said land is trade as well.
Yes, definitely, absolutely. So it's so the phrase is intended to mean any data that is important in trade information. So when we're trading something, we need to declare where it's come from. Country of origin is essential. If you're declaring an object, a beef not to have been reared on a deforested paddock, you have to declare what land and prove that it was your land and the beef was reared on this land and so on. So land is essential too. So that what I'm trying to avoid though is to be drawn into or accused of, you want to take over the whole world of all identifiers. It's, no, we're only interested in sort of trade and commerce related stuff, and not socio-economic other things that may also have important identifiers in states and UN member states. So that was the intent of that addition. But what I want to suggest, Alina, is that I'm going to suggest we merge the changes, but I fully accept that there will be more work to do on the document, right? So by merging,
yes, of course, I understand that this is not the final version, because the more you study a topic, the more you see the need to improve it.
Yeah. So I know that you've got an Authenticator app issue at the moment right now to log into the UNICC GitHub space. So what I'd like to do with your okay is to basically push this or accept this merge, and to do that, what I would have to do is to remove the word draft from the beginning, and save it, and then I think it might then automatically, if it doesn't automatically start, then I just say please merge it. So now I can press merge. So if I press this merge, obviously the result will still be available for review and change and improvement, but it's easier to see when it's being merged. So what you'll see happening now is there's a pipeline running. So whenever we build the website, a number of checks are done. These include the ones to do with the sort of dummy pilot environment that I created. So it's doing a bunch of checks to see if the remote registrars, which I've made up, of course, but the remote registrars are sort of pumping information through, it's harvesting information, it's parsing information, and so on. So that'll run in the background. That was the main merge I wanted to discuss. So once it's finished, we'll be able to see the new content, and then we can review that content again as necessary. The other merge I have waiting is a little different.
Yes.
Steve might be interested in this one. This merge is related to the representation of registrar data. So in our current website, in this document, we've got a table. which Steve helped us improve by adding a few more elements into this rows into this table as it's represented here. It struck me that this table is literally a markdown table, and we have a pilot that we want to run that tests to see whether registrars are meeting this particular standard. So it ought to have a more formal data representation. So it should be something like JSON, for example. So what I've got is an issue where I've discussed that we need to probably have a JSON representation for the data format, and I've got a merge request that uses a JSON format, creates a JSON file, imports it into that markdown, and makes it a bit more kind of robust.
John, can I suggest, we got very similar things in UNTP where, you know, there's a web page that's human readable, but really you want a structured data version of it.
Yep.
And so if you create a folder outside of the Docusaurus website structure and call it grid or something like this, and put your JSON structure in there, what we can do is set up a CI/CD pipeline to deploy it to something like vocabulary.un. Well, could go to grid. Well, we deploy it to a domain name that's permanent, and also use HTTP accept headers so that if you hit that domain with a browser, you see a human readable thing, but if you hit it with machine, you see a machine readable thing. Well, so that's the way to take this to the next step.
So 80% of that is what I've built in the merge already. So the JSON file is outside of the Docusaurus space. It's inside the GitLab environment, but outside the Docusaurus space. It's imported into the Markdown document and rendered as a element of the Markdown document in the build by Docusaurus. But so if you change the JSON, the rebuild of the Docusaurus, I will create
perfect
new version. And it's also used as the parsing sort of definition by the import process that reads in the grid pilots. So it's got elements of that. There's probably something still I can learn from what you guys have been doing. So I will have a look at that as well. But that was the other merged request that's sitting waiting. And I kind of propose to wait until that merge we just did is complete before we're trying to apply this one. But the idea is basically to improve the representation of the grid data request.
I would have a question, John. How about if we decide to merge it now and then later on we might want to edit something, then
always. Absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely. That's the whole point. That's the whole point.
Because I was just having a look at the wording, and I was thinking, for example, instead of, as we said, regarding the definition of the authoritative registers, as we said, the power to create, maintain, and certify official identifiers. How about assign, maybe, or maintain and then validate official identifiers? I don't know. It's just an idea.
Yeah, I absolutely.
Because I'm not so sure. I'm not 100% sure about the wording. You know, it's just.
I think working hard on the glossary is really important, because if we get those terms really well nailed, then we don't need to worry about it in the document. Yeah. And we can just refer to the glossary for the definition. And I think that's important work. And yes, we should go back through and improve it. I just want to see if the build went okay. Did the build go okay? If it didn't, I'll fix it offline. Because I noticed there's a couple of builds that didn't work, so I don't know if it's actually going to finish this process. So probably, as Steve knows, we're doing too many things at once. So yes, it has worked. So we should have on the live website, if I refresh my view, we should actually have a glossary that comes towards the top. This is just done.
Okay, so it's important to know that we can still work on the glossary.
Oh gosh, yes. Oh yes, everything's still open for improvements. Nothing is locked yet at all. I don't think if it necessarily ever will be locked. So the other issue of merge requests we'll wait for, but I want to go to an issue that quickly in the last few minutes, just to make sure everybody's aware of the discussion. Steve and Harman and Sankashan and others have been very actively talking about this whole idea about the digital identity anchor and how we might use it. And one of the concepts we were playing with, and is somewhat in the text at the moment, is this idea that an issuer of a digital identity anchor, an authoritative registrar, has by sort of definition, control over the process of identification of recognizing an organization or recognizing a landowner or recognizing whatever else, and they have authority and control over what they then issue, the alphanumeric string or the whatever else they issue as their identifier. What we were thinking was that other stuff may not be under their control, but might be provided to them by the applicant. One of the examples from the DIA would be the DIDs. So the applicant says, here's a DID or DIDs that I wish to use, and the registrar would check that they do control those DIDs before they lock them into the DIA. Those aren't issued by the registrar, but they're tested and recognized. And we felt there might be therefore a need to recognize two different types of liability, if you like, over data. That this is data we manage and control as a registrar. This is data that's given to us, but we've checked. And then we had a third idea around data that is supplied, but we don't pay any attention to, but they wanted us to include in the DIA. Now, I think there's been some very good discussion in this issue, taking us towards keep it as simple as possible, but no simpler. Don't let this thing explode into a multi-dimensional identity anchor thing. Keep it monodimensional, one type of identifier by the registrar. So even Elena and Jesus, actually, if registradores can issue both a Spanish business identifier, an LEI, and an EU ID, so 3 types of identifiers, they might be commercially available as sort of services. You pay different amounts of euros for each of these 3. We can imagine bundling them into one digital identity anchor, but perhaps that's not a good idea. Perhaps we actually want to put them into 3 and just keep things very simple and atomic. And that's the conversation that is in this thread here about the ideas that are presented and how we might make this work and so on. I think the weight of the discussion is heading towards keep it simple, or atomic is kind of one of the other words we've been using for this. So
nice new wording for that, John, the atomic one. I didn't know that one yet, but no, I completely kind of recognize how you are describing it now. I liked the easy, straightforward concepts of the DIA from the beginning, and that's also how we implement it. I think, and what I also really liked in, let's say, about real world experience, all those organizations are at the moment, the nice thing of it doesn't change that much with what they currently do. That's what I like. So they, for instance, the registradores in Spain, but the same for Holland, they are already at the moment allowed to do indeed the national business registry number and EUED now in soon and LI. And that's why I think it really makes sense to just have each DIA being just that number. Yeah, I think it fits very nicely with the whole concept of the DID, which I think we also want to use in a more broader concept. So I felt if we don't do it, we also deviate a bit from a very core concept, which is the idea, and we have to also educate people a bit more why we do it. So that's my argument for liking it.
Steve, you've also been a very active participant in the issue discussion. Your hands up.
Yeah, look, I think there's a few sort of related issues here. One is more like an architectural principle, right? Which is the whole point of the DIA is to link some authoritative identifier to a thing I control. That's its purpose, right? And we should, and that thing I control is typically some digital twin of a real world thing, right? It's a truck that I've got in asset register, or it's a piece of land, or it's a business. And so in my mind, never mind how you do it, the 2 different options that were described, right? Is it in the DIA or is it in the DID? It seems okay to me to link one DID to multiple identifiers, as long as they're identifying the same thing, right? So, and I would do that in the DID rather than in the DIA, because what I'd rather do it is separate DIAs aggregated in a DID document. Why? Because they might have different life cycles. You know, you issue a Spanish business number and it lasts for much longer than an LEI or something like this. Things expire. And if you've locked it all into one DIA and they have different expiry dates or renewal dates, it gets messy, right? So So I can see the use case that I think Sankashan brought up, or somebody brought up, that said, oh, I'm a customs authority and I want to link this DID not only to your national business identity, but also to your GLN or other things. That's fine, and it makes sense. And I would suggest to do that as multiple DIDs linked to the same, multiple DIAs linked to the same DID document. But also, I think we ought to think about guidance to registers about, I think as Harman brought it up, what you don't want, and it's hard. Well, when you've got a tool like this, and there's a way to get it wrong, then guaranteed some humans will get it wrong, right? And for example, I could create a DID, and I could go to, I don't know, the Australian Business Register and link it to my ABN, and I could go to a farm, state level property identification register and link it to my farm geographic site, which is not a business, it's a farm site, right? Now maybe I could go to another register and link it to an asset, and now I've linked one DID to 3 completely different things. Now I don't know how we prevent that unless it's the same register. So Harman made the point that the register, if Registradores was, for example, presented with a DID, and the particular owner of that DID, as many will, have 2 Spanish businesses, maybe 3 Spanish businesses, right? The same person can own multiple businesses and have a relationship with Registradores. So if somebody comes to Registradores and says, I've got this DID, please link Spanish business number 1 and completely different Spanish business number 2 and completely different Spanish business number 3 to the same DID, even if it's 3 different DIAs, should Registradores allow that, or should it say, oh, that's bad practice? Really, you're identifying 3 completely different things with one, I think we got to think through all these.
I think we have to be careful of calling everything a DIA, Steve. I think
yes,
there is not too many
Steve,
DIAs. If you
Steve,
are
just let me ask one question. Did you just propose that a natural person having a DID is asking registradores to associate this person with a company?
No.
That's what I understood.
No, I meant that a person can have authoritatively several authorized roles with companies, right? I'm a director of this company, and a director of that company, and I'm a director of that company.
Yeah, but the DIA, the digital identity anchor, does that stand for a person or a legal entity?
No, for a legal entity, it's a business. But
yes.
The point I'm making is that I'm, as a human person who has 3 directorships in 3 different companies, might have 1 account with a formal register. So this is the way it works in Australia, right? So in Australia, you have an identity of...
Sorry, what do you mean account by account?
Yeah.
So let me explain how it works in Australia, and then we'll see if it's similar elsewhere, right? So in Australia, there is a thing called MyGov ID, which is a personal identifier, right?
A natural person.
Yes, natural person, right? And now...
So, Steve Capel.
Yes, natural person. Yeah. Now, separately to that, the Australian Tax Office manages the registration of business numbers. And when they do that, they want to know who is the authorized officer of this business, right? And they maintain a thing called the Relationship Access Manager, RAM. All right. So if I log in with my MyGov ID, my personal ID, known to government, to the ATO RAM service, I will see 3 businesses that I have authority to work over, right? That's how it works today, right? Yeah. So ATO knows, which business is which, obviously, right? But it's not impossible that somebody might say, I've created a DID, right? And it's ostensibly meant for one of these businesses. But what's to stop me asking the ATO to link that DID to the 3 different businesses that I am an authorized officer of?
Created a DID for what entity? For an entity,
it doesn't matter,
a natural person or a legal entity?
So the whole point of a DID is that nobody the fuck knows. A DID is a self-sovereign identifier. It's just a key pair. It means nothing until you relate it to something, right? So the point I'm making is when I create a DID, the DID does not know whether it's identifying a boat or me or a business or whatever. It's just a key pair, right? It's not until I relate that did through an authority.
You're leaving the subject matter that you were talking about. I know that you can use a did for any kind of entity.
Yes.
That's not what we're talking about. You made an example.
Well, let's stop for a second because we're at the top of an hour. I think that in the discussion on there's a sort of can of worms about digital identity with people and that legal persons and stuff, which I've been carefully avoiding getting into for the whole project so far. And yet it will no doubt come into play, but I don't think it needs to come into play to answer this issue that we're talking about right now.
No,
so,
it doesn't. It comes into play because the register who's going to link the did ostensibly identifying a business to the authoritative register needs to prove that whoever is asking for it controls that did, right? Not only controls that did, but genuinely represents that business, right? So I create a did for my business, not for me.
Excuse me, Steve, but it identifies the company, not the person, because the
Yes.
administrator that controls the company can change tomorrow. He can be out and you
Rolled over by a bus.
So we're not getting through here. I'm not talking about the authoritative identifier. Of course, it identifies the business, not the person, and the role can change 100%. What I'm saying is, what is a DIA? It is a link between a self-sovereign identifier called a did and an authoritative identifier, right? Now, a
did for a legal entity.
No,
bound
Hans,
to a
Hans,
authoritative
Hans, listen,
identifier.
listen.
It's important.
It's of course important, but I'm still not getting the message across somehow. I think Sankashan understands what I'm saying because he's laughing, right? But the point is, a did is not issued by the registrar. It's created by me. That's the whole point of a did.
Yes.
Right? So I can create 20 dids. And then I use that did. So the registrar now has no control how I use that did. All it's done is said, whoever controls this did has proven to me that they control it and that they are an authorized officer of the business. So actually what they're asserting is the controller of this did is an authorized officer of that business. That's all they're asserting. If I now then go and use that did in a completely different context, nothing to stop me, right? It's not.
That's I agree. I absolutely agree with you, Steve. I'll be nodding. I'm not laughing, but I would be nodding, and I understand what you're saying. So I'm going to suggest that we call a line here because it's just 2 minutes after the hour. But so my proposal on actions for that issue are twofold. One is those of us who are interested, please read the discussion. It's quite interesting. Add your thoughts if they are different to what's already been expressed, or do a +1 if you've agreed with something. But where it comes down to the resolution, I think there is work to do in explaining in our section about the DIA about the use of the DIA in our context, specifically in the context of how we see it being used in relation to grid and authoritative registrars. So I want to narrowly focus on that use and with relevance to the grid. And I think there is evidence by this discussion the need to provide some use case and descriptions.
Does have another problem, please? If I may, I've just tried to log into that UNICC open source code repository, and I was taught that my account is pending approval from your GitLab administrator and hence blocked.
Yes, when you first register or apply, you are effectively in a holding pattern, like a waiting room. You seem to have registered.
I was through there.
And then there's a process where Kevin Bishop or somebody else in New York then goes, yes, we don't see it. Lena and I don't see it. It happens remotely. And
we don't actually. I also had an issue with the login as well. So
yeah,
but I was through that stage.
So none of your issues are mine, I'm afraid. I have no superpower to do any resolution of any issues to do with logging into UNICC.
No, this is not up to us, unfortunately.
So it's Kevin Bishop.
Yeah.
No, actually, no, it's not Kevin, it's UNICC. There are two separate steps, Hans. One is just to create a general account on UNICC GitLab. Nothing to do with this project, just GitLab. And New York approves that. It takes a day or 2 days, and that's it. And if you haven't heard, then something's gone wrong. Secondarily, that allows you to create tickets and things. But if you want to actually push content, now you need someone who is the maintainer of this project to make you a contributor of this project. That's the second step. But you can get a lot done without that second step, right? And
Yeah,
John is the maintainer of this project, so you have to ask him if you want to go further. But just getting a UNICC account allows you to create tickets.
I have that. I see that. I have credentials for that account, but it doesn't seem to work. Who am I going to turn to now? What the first step, the New York step? Who am I going to turn to?
I think Steve's right. There's an email address at unicc.org or something, isn't there, Steve? That's the one you use.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I didn't have a problem with creating the account, so I never had to ask someone to help. So maybe there is on the UNICC opensource.unicc.org or whatever it's called, some help desk email. I don't know.
Flip me,
Okay.
Hans, send me an email with whatever you've got in response or whatever email address you use to register, and I'll forward it on to the people I've been in touch with before and say, can you help? You've made a registration request and apparently you're being in
Very cool.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you,
worries.
John. I'll do that.
Okay. All right, guys. Thank you very much. That was a lively discussion. I'm going to call quits. Hope you will have a good day, rest of your day or evening. Thank you.
Thank you. This is getting interesting, but
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you, Jesus. Good to see you, mate.
see you.
Mate. Stop the recording.